You guys are in for a real treat this evening. As promised, I'm bringing forth to you a senatorial candidate for Senate for New Jersey. And we're going to talk briefly about several issues that are really important to our Newark community. So again, we don't want to just isolate the information to a very small circle of people. So if you can see the live, I'm going to ask that you share it for number one. I'm going to also ask that you invite members of your listening audience for number two. And I'm also going to ask that you pose any questions that you may have to Larry Hamm. I'm going to start by letting him give a bio of himself and who he is. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but we're still going to do that anyway because we have a lot of young people in our listening audience and they should know exactly who a game changer like Larry Hamm actually is. So that being said, Larry, would you just give our listening audience a brief bio about yourself?
Good evening, Sheila. Thank you for having me on. And I have to commend you for your tenacity as a producer. You were determined to get this show on and you got it on. So I thank you for inviting me tonight. Yes, my name is Larry Hamm. I'm the chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, which is a grassroots organization that fights for racial, social, economic justice and peace. POP was founded it was organized in 1982. We passed our Constitution in 1983. So we count from 83, but if you go back in the archives, you'll see leaflets from programs that we organized in 1982 as the People's Organization for Progress. I am a product of Newark. I was raised in Newark, New Jersey. I'm a product of Newark Public Schools. I went to South 17th Street School, grades K through 8. And from there, I went to Arts High School and graduated from Arts High School. It was during my time as a student at Arts High that I guess you could call it my political career began, or one might say my career as an activist, because when I was the leader of the student government at Arts High School, I organized a walkout, a march, and a sit-in. And that event led me to be appointed to the Board of Education at the age of 17, literally 7 days after I graduated. I began serving as a school board member July 1st, 1971. I served for 3 years. At the end of my third year, just before during my last year on the board, I was also the youngest person to ever qualify as a city council candidate. I ran for city council in Newark at the age of 20. And that didn't work out. And I returned to Princeton University. I had been accepted at Princeton in 1971. I left Princeton to serve my term as a school board member, returned to Princeton, and while I was at Princeton, I majored in politics and in protesting. And I helped to organize the People's Front for the Liberation of Southern Africa at Princeton University to force Princeton to divest its funds from companies doing business with South Africa. We had some success in that regard, organized a sit-in there too. And that was in fact, last week was the anniversary, April 11th. Was the anniversary of the sit-in. 210 of us took over Nassau Hall in April of 1978, and didn't get thrown out of school. In fact, went on to do graduate work at Princeton, 2 years of graduate work, but I left Princeton in 1980, returned to Newark, New Jersey, became, like you, Sheila, became the district leader in the 28th district of the West Ward of Newark.
Wow.
While I was a district leader, I organized the 28th District Assembly. And I served several years as district leader and then organized the People's Energy Cooperative, organized 400 families to buy their fuel oil together as a unit and get discounts, lower prices on fuel oil and service contracts. But that really wasn't where my heart was, and it led to the founding of the People's Organization for Progress We began discussions to form an organization around 1981. We met almost a year before we actually decided to form POP. And then we formed it in 1982. And as I said, our Constitution passed in 1983. And for 38 years, we've been working on almost all the issues that affect the Black community, and fighting for racial, social, economic justice and peace. Just a few more things. During that early period, I organized a statewide coalition to get the state of New Jersey to divest its funds from companies doing business with South Africa. That was the New Jersey Anti-Apartheid Coalition. And then was a supporter of Jesse Jackson's 1984 and 1988 campaigns. And through that, organized the New Jersey chapter of the Rainbow Coalition. In 1987, I ran for state assembly together with the famous civil rights attorney, Arthur Kenoy, on the slogan, People's Needs First. And then in 1989, we formed the Malcolm X Commemoration Coalition. You and I have had some talks about Malcolm X.
Yes,
we brought together, we brought together 110 organizations to have the first area-wide celebration of the birthday of Malcolm X. That was at the Robert Treat Hotel. And believe it or not, we filled up the entire ballroom of the Robert Treat at that time. And so, I mean, I could go on and on about the deep details, but suffice it to say, I have been working mainly with the People's Organization for Progress. I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, a supporter of Bernie Sanders. Right. And in 2020, I somehow ended up state chairman of the Bernie Sanders campaign, or what did exist of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Right. But I also declared myself as a candidate for the United States Senate. It was funny because I didn't make a formal declaration. I just kind of posted a notice about a meeting to talk about it.
That's all you had to do.
And then all hell broke loose, right? And so I'm proud to say that we got the campaign together. I am on the ballot. I submitted nearly 4,000 signatures. I needed 1,000 signatures of registered voters to get on, but we submitted almost 4,000 signatures. And now we have roughly 78 days of hard campaigning to do, because the New Jersey primary has been moved because of the corona crisis, has been moved from June 2nd to July the 7th.
Okay, that is guys, that is election note day. Of that, because that's really important. Repeat that again.
Right. The election day, the New Jersey Democratic primary election was originally scheduled for Tuesday, June the 2nd. Mm-hmm. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, it has been moved to July the 7th. Okay, so it'll be the first time. It'll be the first time in history, probably, of New Jersey that the Democratic primary has been held in July.
Okay.
Yes.
So we want to make a note of that, because the least that we could do is to make sure that we're engaging in the elections and that we know when they're coming up. So for the listening audience, I want you, as soon as we're done with this, I want you guys to immediately key it into your calendars, set an alarm, so that you'll have the opportunity to vote. With that being said, I just want to remind everybody, because I see quite a few people have joined us. If you haven't already shared the live, please share the live, because one problem that we have in our community, right, is media, right? And we also want to make sure that we share the information so that people can be empowered by that information. And if you guys have any questions, again, post them to the thread. Now is the best time to ask Larry anything that you want to ask him. He's running for us, not against us. He's running for the people. And so he's here to answer any questions that you can. He's been running for the people his entire life. So this is nothing new to him. As you can hear, he's very experienced. But for whatever you don't know, this is the time to ask. So I'm going to start off with a couple of, maybe just 4 questions, and then I'll leave it up to the listening audience. So question number 1. Larry, can you tell us anything in terms of what you feel about the stimulus? They're talking about a $2,000 stimulus they're putting on the table. What do you feel about that?
Well, the bill that came up today is the fourth popularly called stimulus bill. These are actually emergency relief bills, and there have been three previous bills passed. Without going into a lot of detail, in the last stimulus bill, number three, there were some good things in there for regular folks. One was the provision to increase unemployment insurance by $600 for people during the course of this coronavirus crisis. Mm-hmm. And there were other things, but truthfully, the lion's share of this stimulus exercise, when it's all totaled, maybe $2 trillion, mm-hmm. the lion's share of that went to corporations, the banks, and the wealthiest individuals in society. In fact, the distribution of the money, even that wasn't enough. They had to sneak a provision in there that will actually result in 43,000 millionaires in the United States, each a check for $1.6 million. So people get a one-time payment of $1,200, one time, not per month, one time. And the millionaires get a check for $1.6 million. This is absolutely outrageous.
Now, Larry, I want you, if you can, and I'm sorry to cut you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. No, cut me off. I'll go
no, I don't mean to do that. But because you said that,
it's okay.
I want you to comment on, there was a few people in our communities, nationally, I'm not talking about, but when they talked about getting $2,000, they thought that was a lot of money. They said, oh, they're really pushing it now. And they had no idea that the millionaires had received that type of money. Do you think that we should be getting that type of money, which is $2,000?
Absolutely. If you look at my Facebook page today, you'll see I posted an item that said that people should receive not a one-time $1,200 payment, but in fact, a payment of $2,000 every month for the duration of this crisis. That's what they're getting in Canada. Right. And if you look at all the other countries, I'm talking about the industrialized countries, they are guaranteeing, it's a range anywhere from 75% to 90% of people's salary while they're laid off or furloughed and unemployed. Right. We're the richest country in the world. That's the least that we should do. In fact, I want to let you know, I was supporting, people talk about $2,000 too much. That's what Maxine Waters was calling for. If you followed discussions of her committee,
that's right.
She was calling for, and the first one to call for $2,000 was Bernie Sanders. He said that a one-time payment of $200 wouldn't even pay people's rent. So Congresswoman Ilhan Omar had put in a bill together with some other Congress people. They not only were saying $2,000 a month, they were saying a moratorium on rent and mortgages and water bills and utility bills. In fact, in Ilhan Omar, because there are several bills, in Ilhan Omar's bill, she was saying not just a moratorium, but at least cancellation of those for the duration of this period. Right. So the problem is that most folks are very parochial, including Larry Hamm. We go about our daily lives and, we've got these blinders on and we got to go to work, got to go this, got to do that. And we really don't have time to sit down and read the news. Like when people talk about Medicare for all and universal health care, you would think that that's some kind of alien communist proposal. Yes. But Canada has universal health care. Our neighbor, Mexico, has universal health care. The 32 advanced industrial countries in the world today, the so-called advanced countries, every one of them has universal health care, national health service, except the United States of America.
Wow.
And I think we can really see the folly of this because as a result of this coronavirus crisis, the shutdown of the economy, In the last week, 22 million people have become unemployed. You know what else they have become? People without health insurance. Because in the United States, we have employer-based health insurance. So when you're no longer with that employer, you no longer have health insurance. You know, Great Britain is an advanced industrial country. They've had a national health service, universal health care, since the end of World War II. We need to have that in the United States of America. I mean, people, because I was in a debate with an assemblyman from New York a week or so ago, and he was saying, well, poor people can still go to the hospital. Yes, they go to the hospital, they get charity care, and then in the mail comes a bill for $3,000 for one visit to the emergency room. I am recently retired. I had what they call, I guess, one of the Cadillac plans for health insurance.
Okay.
And every time I turn around, I got an increased premium. I got co-pays. I got the clinic calling me when I'm going to pay. You know, even people that have insurance, it's not nirvana. It's not utopia. It's not paradise for us either. We need a new system. In France, another advanced industrial country, not only do you not pay any bills for your medical care, they pay for your transportation to and from the hospital. You know, look at that movie, Sicko, and you'll see Michael Moore actually takes people over there and experience this. So we need, that's one of the major platform planks I'm running on. Medicare for all, for everybody.
Right. And so we know that Medicare is important, but like and we also know that employment is really important. Thank you for that. What I'd like you to do is establish a link for our listening audience between those issues, because many of us feel that, oh, I'm not political, I don't get into this politics stuff. That I don't think people really understand how the healthcare, employment, all of those things are factored in. And if you could just establish a link between those things that you just discussed and this situation that's going on now with the post office, this VBM, could you like link that and kind of explain that for us?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Someone called me. I need a feature on my phone where I can block calls when I'm doing programs like this, because this happens all the time.
No, you know what, Larry? It happens to me too. All you got to do is ask a kid. I want to say is you put it in airplane mode, but don't take that yet.
Okay. Let me find all right.
And I'll get back to you.
All right. So you asked me to establish a link between all of these issues. All of these issues are interconnected, because all of these issues, the issues that we deal with in our day-to-day lives, are impacted by government. You drive a car, safety issues, safety regulations, gasoline emission standards, the cost of the automobile, all of that is government regulation. You got insurance for your car, government regulation, or maybe deregulation, depending on which party is in power. You know, in the last 40 years, the Republicans have been the party of deregulation, you know, deregulation for everything. In fact, one might say that the era of capitalism that we're in now in the United States is deregulated capitalism, because we had regulations, you know, at one time. And since Ronald Reagan, many of those regulations have been rolled back. We're almost back like in the 19th century period of laissez-faire capitalism. Laissez-faire is French for free hand. Free hand means you could do anything you want, right? And that's almost where we are right about now. Even just this week, during this coronavirus health crisis, Trump deregulated certain industries' requirement to meet pollution standards. How does that affect us? That affects us because in these urban areas, Black people, Black children have the highest levels of asthma and other respiratory problems. And so, you know, every aspect of our lives is impacted by government. But if you don't keep up, if you don't read current events, if you don't listen to programs that discuss issues or watch programs that discuss issues, if you don't have those kind of conversations with people, then if you don't know, you don't really, you can't tell what's really going on. You think all of these things happen because of fate or luck, you know, or because I work hard as an individual or I don't work hard as an individual. Right. No, there's a lot more going on in our society in terms, and at the bottom of all of this, right, is really how much money we make, because the amount of money you make determines, you know, the quality of life that you will have. Right. In the United States today, the richest country in the world, there are more than 330 million people in the United States. 140 million of them live at or below the poverty level. And just above that 140 million is another section of people called the working poor, who work but have low wealth. So, you know, the class system, the way wealth is distributed in society, has an effect on our quality of life. Now, the United States had a period of unprecedented growth after World War II. And, you know, the working class was making progress. The standard of living was rising up until about 1972. If you go back and you look, you see that whereas there had been some distribution of wealth to the middle class or the working class, whichever term you want to use, right, and through the war on poverty, poor people, what we have had really since about 1972 is a reversal. And instead of a downward distribution of wealth, we've had the greatest upward distribution of wealth in human history. Mm-hmm. Not in any period, in human history. There has never been as much wealth held by so few people than there is in the United States today. In the United States today, roughly just three families, have more wealth than the entire lower half of the population in the United States. Right. In the world today, in the entire world, right, there are about 18 people that control more wealth than 3 billion people in the world today. That's insane. And yes, it's insane. It's crazy. And why is it that way? Is it that way because these people are geniuses and they're smart? No, because they have used their wealth to control government in such a way that it would allow them to accumulate this much wealth. Right now, in offshore accounts in the Caribbean, in Bermuda, in other places in the United States, the wealthiest people and corporations in this country have squirreled away $21 trillion. I read that. That's more wealth than half of the nations in the world today. I mean, for the first time in human history, you know, when I was a kid, I used to watch James Bond movies, right? I used to go to the movies to see James Bond. Yeah. And I remember going to see a movie like Goldfinger, right? Yeah. Or Dr. No. And it would be these villains. And this one villain somehow could hold off the entire world, you know, and they'd have to call in James Bond to straighten the situation out. And I'm like, well, how could one person, you know, the country, the United States, got an army, got a navy, got all this stuff. But now, for the first time in human history, there are individuals that hold more wealth than nations, that could threaten an entire nation state. People who have private armies and who, in fact, gain the government in such a way to contract out to them, right, formally activities that were performed by the armies. You know,
Speaking of work.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Cut me off. Cut me off. Don't be afraid to cut me off.
You know I can listen to you all night, Chairman.
Right.
But I just want you to just comment a little bit, because I still have these other two questions on this potential post office shutdown, because that's huge, and this PBM. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yes. The post office. Let me just say, I didn't say it at the top of the program, but my sincerest condolences go out to everybody that has lost somebody during this coronavirus crisis.
Horrendous.
This thing is serious.
It is.
And don't let anybody tell you that this is not happening. It's happening.
It's
people
definitely
are dropping
happening
like flies. People in my organization have died. People in my organization are in the hospital right now. Some of them, I got notice, they're getting ready to go into the hospital. Some of them have lost their mothers, their parents. It's terrible. So I want to send my condolences to those who have lost people, but I also want to salute all those so-called essential workers, the healthcare workers, the postal workers, the transportation workers, the grocery store clerks workers, the warehouse workers, and on, anybody that has to go out here and work. And I salute them because I know that they're putting themselves on the line. My oldest daughter is a nurse. She's been a nurse for 25 years. She works in the hospital in Camden and in Philadelphia. And I fear for my daughter's safety, because I know that in many of these hospitals, the nurses don't have the personal protective equipment, the PPE that they're supposed to have.
That's right.
You know, so you would ask me about the post office. I raised that because postal workers are essential. And I have a special place in my heart because I was a postal worker. I worked in the, I worked in the main branch, the one right down there on Green Street in Newark.
Wow.
I threw mail in the zip code schemes. I worked on the big package assembly line. I worked in the bullpen, throwing the big sacks of mail. I even worked on the dock, loading sacks into the trucks, the big trucks that take the mail out. So I have a special place for postal workers, but we're faced with a crisis right now that the Postal Service may shut down in June or July, because the head of the Postal Service said if they don't get an infusion of cash from the government, that they're going to have to shut down operations. Go ahead.
That doesn't even seem real or possible. How, with the trillions that they just got, would they be?
None of it's going to the Postal Service, because Trump wants to destroy the Postal Service, because reactionary elements in our society, and I have my own personal beliefs about why they're doing it, the reactionary elements in this society have been trying to destroy the Postal Service in the United States for the last 20, maybe even 30 years. What they did, first of all, the Postal Service is the only business that is in the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States requires us to have a postal service. And right now, the Postal Service is the largest employer in the United States. Over 600,000 people work for the post office. And that's a number that's actually drastically down, because they went after the Postal Service. I quite frankly think that one of the reasons they went after the Postal Service because so many Black people work for the post office. But that's just my personal
I can't imagine the link there. I can't, and I see some people chiming in, Chairman, and they're like, Trump hates the post office. That this is news to me. So I'm trying to figure out.
And why does he hate the post office? Because
wait.
Listen.
Answer that, but also factor in us doing a mail-in ballot for the election.
That's exactly why. There's two reasons they hate the post office. One is because who is carrying a big portion of the census questionnaires? Who delivers them? The Postal Service. And why are the census questionnaires important? Because all the money that we receive, that our cities and districts and communities receive from the federal government, is based on the size of our population. So when we put in low numbers, we don't get the money that we're actually supposed to have. So one of the reasons they want to interrupt the Postal Service so that this will have, hello? What
Yes, I'm
happened?
here.
So, yeah. So that this will have, you know, an effect on the distribution of resources from the federal. I'm sorry, I have to put my I don't want the phone to go dead. I put can you still
Oh
hear
yeah,
me?
please don't let it go dead because we only got a couple of
Yeah,
more minutes.
yeah. Hold on 1 second. Let me put my earplug back in. Can you? Hello?
I should have scheduled a 2
Okay,
hour.
I
I
got
scheduled
you.
for 1 hour because.
All right. Let me finish this question on the Postal Service. So
Okay.
one reason is it'll interrupt the census. The other reason is vote by mail. They don't want a vote by mail election because Trump said it in a press conference himself last week. He said, if we have vote by mail, Republicans will never win an election. That's a quote from Donald Trump. You can look it up on the internet. He said it last week in a press conference. So they want to destroy the Postal Service. And the other reason they want to destroy it because Trump's friends that own FedEx and UPS, they want the work that the Postal Service has. That's what, you know, the United States Postal Service is the only company in the entire United States that's been required by Congress to pay its pensions of its employees 75 years in advance. And that's what's killing the Postal Service today. Okay, let's get another question before my
Okay, yes,
30
because I
minutes
only
is
got a
up.
couple more, and I have to hurry. With the census, right? I'm not telling you anything that's new. A lot of people who live in urban areas are very skeptical about filling out that census. I want
Right.
you to a little bit tell us why it is so important, especially now, to complete that census and how that impacts the representation that we so
That's right.
desperately need in Congress. If you could just
That's right.
elaborate on
That's
that.
right. Well, the representation that we have in Congress is based on population. Most people don't know that we've actually lost one congressperson. New Jersey had 13 congressional districts. And as a result of an undercount, I believe, an undercount in population, that's an editorial comment on my part, that we actually lost. So now, instead of 13 congressional districts, we only have 12 congressional districts. And if we don't correctly count the population, each congressional district, I think, is required to have, I think it's 500,000 people in that congressional district. So if we don't count the people accurately, if the figures are lowballed, then we could lose representation. But even beyond the representation, the money that goes to schools, that goes to roads, that goes to anything the federal government gives money to is based on the size of the population, and the size on the population is based on the census. That's
So
why
Larry,
people, yes.
when you have 50,000 people, right? And they're saying that I'm not going to vote, my vote doesn't matter, I don't believe in the process. What would you say to those people?
Well, you know, if it depends how emotionally committed they are to that position. I've learned that there's some people you can't argue with. You
Yeah, but
know,
if you could give them a message.
but look, the truth of the matter is that our votes do count. Participating in the process does matter. Does it always work out to our benefit? No, it doesn't always work out to our benefit. But if we don't participate, it will never work out to our benefit. So I'm old enough to have seen, I'm 66 years old. I'll be 67 next year. I was born in 1953. So I was born into apartheid America. I saw Jim Crow when I was sent down south because I was a bad kid when I was little. So they had to send me down south every summer because if I didn't, I'd probably get locked up or something. But I saw segregation, legal segregation in the South, and I saw the, in fact, segregation that we had up here. You know, I remember going on a bus ride to Canada, and we was going through upstate New York, and we went to the Howard Johnson. This was New York. And they told us the colored people got to go around to the bathroom in the back. I've seen that change. I've seen the destruction of Jim Crow. I saw the passage of the Civil Rights Act. I saw the national Black community go from 400 Black elected officials in 1966 to 10,000 in 1972. I've seen, so change does happen,
right.
but the struggle is ongoing. You know, even though we've had those changes, that's right, we still got a lot of, and whereas we fought for civil rights in the 60s, I think the fight of the 21st century is for economic rights and economic justice.
Right, I agree. Last question, Larry. There's a huge debate going on. Information is scattered. Today, we saw an article that talked about the feds and something with the CDC and a lot of these things pertaining to 5G and the radiation. Now, where I live, I was able to download an app, and I noticed that the radiation was extremely high in the area where I live. And I would just like to hear your opinion on that, and because it's very debatable. There's some that are saying, "Oh, it's not true. It's not true." Some people are trying to be distracting from dealing with the situation by saying, "Oh, it's not the coronavirus," but I think they're two different things.
They are two different things.
So can you share, like, what's your stance on that? Like, how
my stance is that the issue of 5G is worthy of study. Awesome. See, it's a matter of record. For instance, this cell phone that I'm using right now to talk to you and look at you emits radiation. And radiation affects the human body. Now, the question is, does it emit enough radiation to have a negative effect? Some people say now, even the cell phone technology that we use right now can have a negative effect on our bodies. But people wanted cell phones. The people who manufacture cell phones want them, and people who use cell phones want them. And so, again, they send lobbyists to, now all of this has been discussed. You know, one of the things most people don't read is the congressional record. The testimony that are given in committees are all recorded and all printed. And you can get, I think it's published monthly, the congressional record review. And you would be surprised at the testimonies that people give in Congress. Your eyes would like, for real, you know, and they went ahead with this anyway. You know, let me just finish it. It's just like with seatbelts. When seatbelts first came out, everybody was against seatbelts. You know, but after a long struggle led by Ralph Nader and other community advocates, seatbelts finally became a reality. So, long story short, there's research on 5G technology. 5G emits more radiation than 4G. The question is it enough radiation to, in fact, say that we shouldn't use 5G? Obviously, they pushed it through, but I'm telling you, there are countries right now that have this other governments in other countries have this 5G thing under review. So it is an issue that's worthy of study and worthy of debate, you know, and I think once you begin to study and discuss it, that's when things begin to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And lastly, I just want to close out with the strongest point for the evening. When President Obama took office and he won, I remember, again, there was a sea of people in Congress that did not look like us. So if they don't look like us, they don't know us, they're not going to be able to support our best interests. I support you, Chairman. You know that. I want other people to be able to support you as well. Can you tell just the people in closing how important it is to support and to support somebody, right, that's representative of themselves, and what kind of impact that has on our community as well as our society as a whole?
Well, we need people. The Congress is still predominantly white. But not only is the racial characteristic significant, but it's predominantly wealthy. The majority of people who sit in Congress, in the House and the Senate, the majority of them are millionaires. So, you know, one would ask the question, in whose interest would millionaires legislate if they were in power? Would they legislate primarily in the interest of the work of the people who work for them? Or would they legislate in their own interests and those of their rich friends? So right. It's very important that we send people to Congress who will fight uncompromisingly for Black people, for poor people, for working people, for the middle class. Like, the middle class is slipping into the working class. The working class is filling up the ranks of the poor, and the poor are falling through holes in the safety net. Overwhelming majority of people in this country are going backwards in terms of their standard of living. So we must send people to office, regardless of what office it is, who will fight in our interests, who will fight for the things we need. You know, a lot of people, you know, don't like Bernie Sanders. I like Bernie Sanders. And why do I like Bernie Sanders? Because he has been uncompromising. Now, he's white and Jewish, and I'm Black, you know, and we're not the same skin color, ethnic group, racial group. But I'm telling you, people may not believe this, but there's not been a more uncompromising voice for working people in the Senate than Bernie Sanders. And what we need are more people in the Senate like him. But I'm gonna leave on this note.
There's a minute left.
We need both an inside strategy and an outside strategy. Because social change, in the final analysis, is made by social movements. And people in office become the voices of those social movements. But if you don't have a movement outside protesting and marching and writing and speaking and doing all and banging on doors, change is not going to happen.
That's right.
You know, so you need both. You need to elect fighters and people with integrity in office, but we need to build a movement for justice outside.
Absolutely. Listen, thank you so much. Would you let everybody know how, what is your website and how can they contact you?
Yes, the website for the campaign is www.hamm4senate.org.
Is that the number 4?
No, it's the word 4.
Okay.
HAMMFORSENATE, hamm4senate.org. There's also a Larry Hamm for Senate, Hamm 2020 Facebook page. You can go on the Facebook page, go on the website, find out about our campaign, sign up to be a volunteer, and also make a donation. Because unfortunately, we still live in a system that's driven by money.
Yeah.
And even somebody with a poor people's campaign got to have a little bit of money to make the campaign. You have to have some money. Yes. So please go to the website, go to Facebook page, and join us in this campaign that is not just about electing someone to office, but is about building a movement.
Absolutely. Larry, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay,
thank you for being so tenacious and getting the show on.
I wanted to make sure that the people got the information, and we're going to continue to give the community information. Thank you so much for signing on.
All right.
And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Peace.